fun, and doing SNL, you have to do it so you don't have time to think. So you're forced to say, look, I'll just enjoy it, go with it, and even if I make a mistake, it's okay.
Robert De Niro made 13 mob movies with Martin Scorsese, but after Casino in 1995, he suddenly stopped. They didn't work together again for 24 years. In a private conversation, he admitted something shocking. The violence had gone too far. People weren't just watching anymore, they were worshiping. In 2023, at age 80, he finally explained why he wanted it to end. And it wasn't just about movies. It was about his father's death, the drugs that nearly killed him, and a question he couldn't answer. Was he glorifying the very thing that destroyed his childhood? Robert De Niro came into the world on August 17, 1943, in the middle of World War II. He was born in a cramped Manhattan apartment to two struggling artists, Virginia Admiral and Robert De Niro Sr. They married in 1942, and by the time Robert Jr. arrived, they were fully immersed in the bohemian life of Greenwich Village. But when Robert was just 2 years old, his father left. Not out of anger, but honesty. He was gay, something nearly impossible to live with openly in the 1940s. Still, he moved just a few blocks away, renting a studio and staying close to his son. They spent weekends together, at jazz clubs, art museums, and small film houses. Virginia, though now a single mother, never turned bitter. She worked jobs she never dreamed of taking, grinding as a typist and editor to keep the lights on. The two never stopped being friends. Later, in an HBO documentary, De Niro read his father's journals aloud, proof that the love between them, though complicated, never really ended. As a child, De Niro was quiet, shy, and unusually pale. Other kids started calling him Bobby Milk. Not out of cruelty, just curiosity. His skin was pale like cream, strange in a neighborhood filled with tough, tan-faced Italian boys. He wandered into Little Italy's back streets, found a gang, and somehow, the ghostly boy became one of them. They weren't dangerous, more mischievous than criminal, but the way they walked, talked, carried themselves, that stuck with him forever. Those boys became lifelong friends. Decades later, their mannerisms would sneak into every mobster he played. His father hated it. He worried the boy would turn away from books and art toward street life. But De Niro loved both worlds. He kept the gang and the galleries. He watched and listened. Virginia never gave up on her son's potential. After the separation, she worked for a theater program, and as part of her pay, she got free acting classes for him. At just 10 years old, De Niro stepped onto a stage as the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz. Something clicked. He could hide behind the mask of a character. The shy boy disappeared. Acting let him explore his fears without having to speak in his own voice. It was magic. But there was another secret shaping him. When he was 2, while custody talks were still ongoing, his Catholic grandparents quietly baptized him, going against both parents' wishes. His father had left Catholicism behind years ago, and Virginia openly despised organized religion. Yet, without permission, the grandparents took him to a church and had holy water sprinkled on his head. It may have seemed like nothing at the time, but later in life, De Niro said very little about religion. When pressed, he once muttered, "If there is a God, he has a lot to answer for." That tension, the push and pull between sin and salvation, showed up again and again in his characters. It lingered. He bounced around schools, Elizabeth Irwin, then the High School of Music and Art, but nothing held him. He dropped out by 16, convinced he didn't need a diploma to chase the feeling he found on stage. His mother had worked at Maria Piscator's dramatic workshop, and through that, he met the world of serious theater. He trained with Stella Adler, who had taught Brando, and he later joined Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio. He wasn't just learning lines, he was learning how to become someone else completely. When asked later why he thought he could make it, he said, "I looked at TV one day and thought, if these guys can do it, and they're not that good, I can't be any worse." He wasn't wrong. As he trained in method acting, he never let go of the streets. His gang friends stayed close. His accent stayed real. His body language never forgot those early days around Kenmare Street. He said once that acting was a safe way to live a dangerous life, doing things he'd never dare to try in reality. His first real mentor was Shelley Winters, the Oscar-winning actress who spotted him early. Through her, he landed early roles and returned to actor's studio training. She believed in him before the world did. Her faith mattered. Before anyone knew his name, he spent years in off-Broadway theater, where rejection was constant and budgets were non-existent. He acted in plays few people saw, alongside future stars like Al Pacino and Raul Julia. These tiny venues, sometimes no bigger than a living room, became his proving ground. Between 1962 and 1963, he auditioned over 100 times and kept showing up. That grind shaped him more than any classroom. His first movie was a strange little film called The Wedding Party. Shot in 1963 for just $50, it sat unreleased until 1969. He was 20. He played a nervous groomsman, and you could already see the intensity in his eyes. No trailers, no permits. Just guerrilla filmmaking. He was paid $50 and slept on couches. Next came Greetings in 1968. He played a draft-dodging voyeur obsessed with JFK conspiracies. It was raw, weird, political. He earned $50 again, despite giving everything. One scene had him staging fake anti-war protests with actors pretending to be angry mobs. It blurred reality so well that real protesters got confused. The film earned a cult following, pulling in $1 million on a $43,000 budget. Then came the low point, Sam's Song. De Niro took the lead role in a sloppy political thriller that spiraled into chaos. Mobsters, fake evidence, Nixon conspiracies. It didn't work. He made $500, the most he'd earned so far, but he hated the experience so much he refused to promote it. Years later, the film was recut and renamed The Swap, trying to ride the coattails of his Raging Bull fame. It failed again. He learned from that. Never take a role unless you believe in the director. In Hi, Mom, he reprised the character from Greetings, this time diving even deeper into chaos. The budget was bigger, $150,000, but the scenes were even riskier. He filmed nude scenes. One segment, Be Black Baby, simulated racism so violently that some theaters refused to show it. People didn't get it, but De Niro stood by it. It earned him $1,000. He was starting to get noticed. Then came The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, a mob comedy that should have been a hit. It was written by Mario Puzo, the same man behind The Godfather. De Niro was paid $10,000, his highest yet, and he learned Sicilian dialect in 3 weeks just for the role. But the film flopped. It tried too hard to be funny. The same producer had offered him a role in The Godfather, but De Niro turned it down to make this film instead. It haunted him. Years later, he said it was the worst decision of his early career. In 1973, Brian De Palma hosted a Christmas dinner that would shape cinema for the next 50 years. He had already worked with Robert De Niro in 3 projects, and knew what this timid kid was capable of. When Martin Scorsese met him, something clicked. Soon after, De Niro was cast as Johnny Boy in Mean Streets, a reckless gambler who owed money all over town. It was a small-budget film, just $500,000, but De Niro's performance didn't feel small. He improvised most of his scenes, his chaotic energy becoming the soul of the movie. Critics took notice. The New York Film Critics Circle named him Best Supporting Actor, and just like that, a legendary partnership was born. Francis Ford Coppola watched Mean Streets and made a bold move. He gave De Niro the role of young Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part 2 without even asking him to audition. It wasn't just gutsy, it was unheard of. De Niro didn't take it lightly. He flew to Sicily and stayed there for 3 months, soaking in the environment, the people, the dialect. He wasn't even fully Italian, just 1/4 through his paternal grandfather from Molise. But growing up in Little Italy had left a mark. He spent 4 months learning Sicilian because almost all of his lines were in the dialect. When the film came out in 1974, audiences were stunned by how real his performance felt. Quiet, controlled, yet terrifying. At the Oscars in 1975, he was just 31 when he won Best Supporting Actor. His paycheck for the role had been around $50,000. The next year, his rate skyrocketed. He had been getting $10,000 per film before Godfather. Within 5 years, he was charging $500,000, a 5,000% jump. Hollywood finally had its ultimate method actor. The sets weren't always easy. During Mean Streets, he and Harvey Keitel, both steeped in method acting, clashed. and pushed each other nonstop. Scorsese let them improvise heavily, wanting every line to feel real. Though much of the movie was filmed in Los Angeles for budget reasons, the spirit of New York bled into every scene, especially the chaotic bar fights and the mailbox bomb scene. They weren't acting like they were from the neighborhood. They were the neighborhood. This approach took a toll. Stories floated around about chain smoking, tension, and long hours. After the Oscar win, De Niro became picky. He turned down gangster roles left and right. He didn't want to be boxed in. He took a 90% pay cut to play Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver the very next year. And then Raging Bull happened. For Taxi Driver, he got a real taxi license. Spent days behind the wheel in New York traffic, picking up passengers. His license expired on May 31st, 1976. One day on set, they were short on time, falling behind. The producers wanted to wrap. Instead, Scorsese told De Niro to play. In front of a mirror, De Niro pulled out a gun and began improvising. "You talking to me?" The line wasn't in the script, but it stuck. It became the 10th most iconic quote in film history. The mohawk he wore in the film's climax wasn't real. It was a prosthetic, because De Niro had other filming commitments lined up right after, but none of that mattered. He had already made movie history. Then came Raging Bull. He trained with Jake LaMotta himself for nearly a year. They sparred over 1,000 rounds. LaMotta said De Niro could have gone pro. For the second half of the film, De Niro gained 60 pounds. He ate like a man possessed. 3 full breakfasts every morning, then lunch, dinner, dessert. At first, he liked it. Then, it became misery. His producer begged him not to go through with it, warned him about his health. De Niro just said, "I got to do it." He even fought in 3 amateur bouts in Brooklyn, and won 2. But the weight took its toll. You could hear him wheezing during takes. Scorsese had to shoot the last scenes quickly. After filming the Fat LaMotta scenes, De Niro faced the opposite challenge, shedding the weight. 5 months of dieting, saunas, workouts, and massage therapy followed. He landed in the hospital at one point due to dehydration, but it paid off. In 1981, he won the Oscar for Best Actor. When Jake LaMotta watched the film, he cried and asked his ex-wife if he had really been that bad. She said, "You were worse." Taxi Driver had dark ripple effects. De Niro had dived so deep into the paranoid mind of Travis Bickle that he started showing signs of disconnection in real life. The loneliness, the detachment. It wasn't just acting. Then the movie took a darker turn in the real world. John Hinckley Jr. watched the film over and over, bought the soundtrack, memorized the mannerisms. He thought impressing Jodie Foster, who played the young girl in the movie, meant mimicking Travis Bickle. On March 30th, 1981, he shot President Ronald Reagan in a twisted attempt to get her attention. The line between fiction and reality had blurred, and De Niro's performance was at the heart of it. De Niro never chased money. Even when offered big roles, including rumored cameos in Star Wars, he passed. He only worked with directors who pushed boundaries, people like Scorsese, Michael Cimino, Bernardo Bertolucci. For Taxi Driver, the whole team worked on a shoestring budget of $1.9 million. That film would go on to change American cinema forever. In Goodfellas, De Niro became Jimmy Conway, the mobster behind the 1978 Lufthansa heist that stole $6 million, worth $29 million today. To prepare, De Niro called Henry Hill, the real mobster whose story inspired the film. He wanted to understand not just what happened, but how it felt. The tension in the dinner scenes, the paranoia. Every reaction came from real fear. The heist planning scenes were shot in a 200-year-old bar in Queens. Every detail was rooted in truth. The funny how scene, total improv. Joe Pesci told Scorsese about a time he got threatened for calling a mobster funny. Scorsese asked him to recreate the moment with Ray Liotta without telling the other actors. That raw confusion in their faces, it was real. Then Casino came in 1995. De Niro played Sam Rothstein, based on Frank Rosenthal, who ran multiple Vegas casinos. Rosenthal could do 6-digit math in his head. De Niro studied roulette mechanics, surveillance routines, and betting systems. But the brutality in the film shocked even seasoned mob watchers. In real life, the enforcer character based on Tony Spilotro wasn't beaten with bats in a cornfield. The real story was darker. He and his brother were lured to a basement near O'Hare and beaten to death by 15 men. Their bodies were dumped 100 miles away. In Cape Fear, De Niro spent $5,000 to ruin his teeth and $20,000 to fix them. The tattoos he wore were real vegetable dye, designed to last for months. The script required him to train hard, so his muscles grew. The tattoos had to be resized. The rage in that character wasn't fake. It was sculpted. After Casino, things changed. Both De Niro and Scorsese stepped back from crime films. They didn't make another narrative feature together until The Irishman in 2019. The violence in their earlier films had raised questions. Were they glorifying crime? Were they creating myths around killers and thieves? That pause wasn't just creative, it was reflective. In Sleepers, 1996, De Niro played a priest from Hell's Kitchen. The film claimed to be based on true events, though many challenged its accuracy. Still, the film grossed over $165 million worldwide and sparked intense debates. In Ronin, 1998, he did car chases so intense that even he looked visibly terrified. Real Le Mans drivers took over the wheel, while De Niro sat next to dummy steering wheels mimicking movement. No CGI, just raw driving. Meet the Parents, Flip the Switch. De Niro went full comedy. The lie detector scene was his idea. Inspired by a CIA friend, he pitched it on set. The movie made $330.4 million worldwide and became a franchise that grossed over $1.13 billion. Even in his personal life, drama followed him. During Hide and Seek in 2005, he was married to Grace Hightower, but their relationship was turbulent. They married in 1997, divorced in 1999, then renewed vows in 2004. By 2018, they separated again. Their daughter Helen was born in 2011 via surrogate. Life off-screen was just as complex as the roles he played. In 2019, something unusual happened in the world of film. Martin Scorsese directed The Irishman, and it wasn't just another mob movie. It quietly changed the way visual effects were done, without anyone wearing those awkward gray suits or dots on their faces. Robert De Niro didn't want any facial markers or helmet rigs, so Industrial Light and Magic had to invent something completely new. They called it Flux. They used a special 3-camera infrared setup that weighed over 60 pounds. Instead of capturing his face in a studio and pasting it on later, they let him act freely and used this system to handle the rest. It took 108 days of filming across 117 different locations to capture a story that spanned decades. The final film had 1,150 visual effects shots and ran for 209 minutes, Scorsese's longest ever. To make sure it worked, they ran a test in 2015 where De Niro redid a scene from Goodfellas. Back then, he was 74, but they made him look like he was 46 again. They didn't need animators for the face. There are literally no facial animators in the credits. Scorsese watched daily renders for 3.5 hours a day and never once complained the tech didn't look right. De Niro played Frank Sheeran at 7 different ages: 24, 36, 41, 42, 47, 55, and 76, and it just worked. Then came Killers of the Flower Moon. The plan was to shoot it in 2018, but the pandemic crushed every timeline. Everything got pushed until they finally started rolling cameras from April to October 2021. De Niro played William Hale, the man who quietly pulled strings during the Osage murders of the 1920s. It was a story buried in oil and blood in Oklahoma soil, and it became the most expensive production ever filmed in the state, between $200 to $215 million. De Niro researched Hale deeply, reading everything from the 1920s archives. These were the years when members of the Osage Nation became millionaires overnight, and white men like Hale manipulated, stole, and killed to get that money. The movie finally premiered at Cannes in May 2023, before hitting theaters on October 20th. It received 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Scorsese and De Niro had now made 10 films together. This one felt different. The role wasn't about loud evil, it was about subtle corruption, what Scorsese described as the banality of evil. And De Niro played it quietly, coldly, calculatingly. The pandemic lockdown actually actually helped him get into that headspace. Fast forward to 2025, and De Niro wasn't slowing down. The Alto Nights hit theaters on March 21st. This time, he didn't just play one character, he played two. Both were rival New York mob bosses, Vito Genovese and Frank Costello. These were real men with real tension, and the film was written by Nicholas Pileggi, the same mind behind Goodfellas. Barry Levinson directed it. The plot builds up to May 2nd, 1957, when Genovese ordered an attempted hit on Costello. The bullet only grazed his head, and Costello survived. De Niro had to wear different prosthetics to differentiate the roles, but it wasn't just about makeup. He brought decades of mob experience into each role. The film, originally titled Wise Guys, was shot in Cincinnati, but it's all meant to look like 1950s New York. Costello had influence. Genovese had ambition. One had real power. The other just wanted it. At 81, De Niro was still returning to his roots, but with more control than ever. That same year, Zero Day premiered on Netflix. It was February 20th, 2025, and for the first time in his life, De Niro led a television series. He played former President George Mullen, a man who must figure out who launched a cyber attack that killed thousands and brought America to its knees. Created by the minds behind Narcos and former NBC News head Noah Oppenheim, the series was filmed in New York's Steiner Studios. Production finished in June 2024 after delays from the 2023 writers and actors strikes. De Niro said he didn't base the character on any real president, even though he's known for criticizing Trump. The team behind the show made sure it wasn't partisan. Mullen struggles with hallucinations, self-doubt, and truth itself. Angela Bassett, Jesse Plemons, and Lizzie Kaplan joined the cast. It's not just about politics, it's about reality, fear, and trust. But behind the scenes, life wasn't always stable. De Niro's first marriage was to Diane Abbott, starting in 1976. They had a son, Raphael, that same year, and De Niro adopted her daughter, Drana. They divorced in 1988. He once said it's easier not to have kids if a marriage might end because divorce becomes more complicated. After that, he had twins, Julian and Aaron, later known as Aaron, with Tukey Smith in 1995 through IVF and a surrogate. They broke up in 1996. In 1997, he married Grace Hightower. Their son, Elliot, was born, and later their daughter, Helen Grace. They stayed together for over 20 years before separating in 2018. And just when it seemed like his parenting years were behind him, in April 2023, De Niro became a father again at age 79. His girlfriend, Tiffany Chen, gave birth to a baby girl named Gia. He talked about it publicly during a May 2023 appearance, mostly to stop the rumor mills. By 2025, he said his daughter was pure joy and admitted he now spent more time watching Miss Rachel and the Wiggles than movies. In courtrooms, things got complicated too. In 2019, a woman named Graham Chase Robinson sued him for $12 million. She had worked for him since 2008 and said she was treated like an office wife, even asked to scratch his back. In court, when she testified that he once refused to use a back scratcher because he liked the way she did it, De Niro lost his temper. He shouted, "Shame on you," in front of the whole courtroom. On November 9th, 2023, the jury awarded her $126 million. It was against his company, not him personally, but the scandal made headlines. And then there were the drugs. Back in the late 1970s, during the filming of New York with Liza Minnelli, cocaine was everywhere. Scorsese was deep in addiction, and sets shut down constantly. De Niro's voice got damaged from the partying, and he had to go through therapy to fix it. It scared him. Scorsese nearly died. He weighed just 109 pounds before ending up in the hospital in 1978. That's when both of them decided to stop for good. It may have saved their lives. De Niro's father, a painter, died of prostate cancer on May 3, 1993, his 71st birthday. They had a distant relationship growing up. His parents divorced when he was 3, and his father struggled with depression and hiding his sexuality. It wasn't until later that De Niro read his father's journals and truly understood him. In 2014, HBO released a documentary where De Niro read those pages on camera. In 2015, one of his father's works sold for over $31,000, 4 times the estimate. De Niro later created a $25,000 prize in his father's name for American painters. He didn't want the world to forget his dad's art. His career has always been packed with milestones. He won an Oscar for The Godfather Part II and another for Raging Bull. In 2011, he received the Cecil B. DeMille Award. Kevin Spacey introduced him, calling him one of the greatest actors of all time. He opened Tribeca Grill in 1990 with Drew Nieporent. It became a spot for celebrities and artists, hosting nights with Mandela and Springsteen. That restaurant helped revive downtown New York, alongside the Tribeca Film Festival, which he co-founded in 2002 with Jane Rosenthal. After 9/11, it brought people back. During COVID in 2020, they had to cancel everything, but he helped launch We Are One, a digital version with other festivals worldwide. In 2021, Tribeca was the first major festival to return in person. His activism also got louder. At the 2018 Tony Awards, he walked on stage and said, "Fuck Trump," live on TV. The crowd erupted. CBS censored it, and Trump fired back on Twitter. In 2024, outside Trump's trial, De Niro called him a clown and a dictator. Because of that speech, he lost an award from the National Association of Broadcasters, who said his politics would be a distraction. He didn't seem to care. Then, in October 2025, he released a video online urging Americans to join the No Kings protest. He said America had done this before, stood up to King George, and now it was time again. Over 2,500 protests happened across the country. Some called it un-American. He called it necessary. And somewhere in the middle of all this, De Niro made a single phone call that changed Hollywood. Back in 1993, during this boy's life, he told Martin Scorsese about a young actor he was working with. "His name is DiCaprio." He said, "You should work with him." That one sentence started a partnership that gave us The Departed, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Killers of the Flower Moon. In 2020, DiCaprio returned the favor, handing De Niro the SAG Lifetime Achievement Award. He called him elemental, like he was always here and always will be.